This is Scott Allen Miller here with Sam IT on YouTube. Today I want to talk about how the Raspberry Pi is hardware, it's not software. So the Raspberry Pi is, as everyone knows, it's the best-selling computer of all time. It's the first machine to ever displace the Commodore 64, which has held the title of the best-selling single computer for decades, like 30 years. Maybe more. The Raspberry Pi is certainly some really cool stuff, and it comes in different versions, but essentially it is a single board computer that runs the ARM RISC architecture. It's a specific specification, I guess that's redundant, that is kind of like defining the PC. Now, let's step back. What is a PC? IBM defined the personal computer architecture, literally named the PC architecture, and its first release of that reference was the IBM PC 5150 around 1981 to 83, somewhere in there. That became the foundation of the PC ecosystem, of which most people still use those computers today. Every Mac that is sold is a PC. It's the only architecture that Apple supports for their servers, their handheld devices, their iOS, the phones and tablets. Those are not PCs. Android tablets are not PCs, but your Linux desktop is almost always a PC. Right now, your Windows desktop is basically certainly a PC. But PC is a specific hardware specification and tells us nothing about the software that runs on top of it. So your PC might run Mac, Windows, Linux, FreeBSD, or something you created yourself. The current CPU that is CPU architecture that is required for something to be part of the PC world is either the AMD 64, which is the 64-bit implementation of the PC design, or x86, which is the 32-bit Intel implementation of the design. Those are the only two, and PC specifications had to be updated to allow for AMD 64 to have a 64-bit means of working within the PC ecosystem. Raspberry Pi is its own thing, like PC. It has its own processor architecture that is chosen for it, which is 64-bit ARM RISC. And it has its own system specifications that are much broader than simply the CPU, just like the PC does. You can build a computer that uses an AMD 64 processor and not be a PC. Pretty easily, actually. It's just that nobody bothers because the PC specification is so broad and useful and free. So everybody uses it because it allows everything to interoperate. That's how you're able to just go install Windows or Linux or Mac onto just about anything, is because they're all following the PC specification. Whereas anything can follow the Raspberry Pi specification, and anything that will install on a Raspberry Pi will install there. That's the handy thing about specifications of that nature. But just like the PC is only about the hardware, Raspberry Pi is only about the hardware. It tells us nothing about the software running on top. Why do I bring this up? I bring this up because in the majority of cases, we'll hear people talk about the Raspberry Pi, and they will ask questions about it as if by saying they're running a Raspberry Pi that in some way it defines what the system can do in regards to its software. For example, can you join a Raspberry Pi to a Windows domain? I don't know. What does that mean? Raspberry Pi is just the hardware. We need to know what you're running on top of it. Can you put a web server on your Raspberry Pi? I don't know. Can you put a web server on your PC? It depends what software you put on top of it. It's simply the hardware. What you need to know, the same as with a PC, is what are you running on it? You would never ask, can I join a PC to a domain? Because you don't know. You don't know if the thing running on it has domain capabilities. That's a question for the software. So understanding that the Raspberry Pi is like PC and capabilities come from software, not the hardware, is really important. And it's really basic to IT, but it seems to be something unique to the Raspberry Pi, has created confusion where people think, even though the Raspberry Pi runs a giant range of different operating systems, including tons of different Linux OSs, tons of different BSD OSs, it can even run Windows. The one thing you know you can't run on it, there's no Mac version that will run on it. But almost everything else will run in some version on the Raspberry Pi. So you have the same range of questions and capabilities and unsure situations as you would on a PC. So you need to be aware of what software you're running and not think of the Raspberry Pi as being magic or black box or something special. It's just a computer with a different architecture running the same software you would anywhere else. So if the question is, can Windows join a domain? Then that answers your question. If it's, can Linux join a domain? Well, in that situation, it's, does it have Samba on it? And if you're running Samba on your Linux, on your Raspberry Pi, yes, it can join a domain, just like Samba on Linux anywhere can, because it doesn't change how things interact on the network, it doesn't change how software works, it's just another computer. So I know this is kind of more of a rant than it is a technical talk, but it's an important one. This is one of those times that we found a thing within the industry that a huge number of people are just confused about this pinpoint. It's not a general problem. It is something unique about the Raspberry Pi that has possibly the majority of people using them confused as to where the hardware starts and the software takes over. And if we just look at them as a normal computer running normal operating systems, the same as anything else anywhere, I think that will answer the majority of questions and allow people to understand what they're working with far better. Thanks for joining me. I hope that this was helpful as always. And if you have questions, notes below. Remember to like and subscribe. And if you want to sponsor us, you can do so on Patreon.